Welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm so excited to be joined again by my co-host, Sarah. Sarah's here for another conversation, and today's guest is pretty special because last year when we talked with him with co-host Olivia, this was one of her favorite conversations with this guest. So that was pretty awesome. And so before I introduce him, I just want to say hi to Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Thanks for having me again.
Yay. I'm so glad you're back. And in anticipation of this conversation, you actually went back and listened to that first conversation that we had with today's guest. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I did. Yes.
Yeah. What stood out to you from what you listened to?
I am wrestling with the idea of how we see God in other people, and how their relationships with us impact how we experience God. So those were a lot of the thoughts that I was having as I was listening to the podcast.
Yeah. Well, today's guest is Jesse Childress. He was on here before talking a little bit about his background. He's a writer, he's an apologist, and he's also interested in psychology. So he's an interesting person, and I'll let him share a little bit more. Welcome back to the podcast, Jesse.
Thanks, Janelle. I guess to sort of explain the intro that Janelle gave of me, I do have some background in the world of apologetics. Have a master's in cultural apologetics from Houston Christian University, and just was very interested and into that. I guess that way of entering into faith through like high school and college. I'm just really curious about a lot of questions and like wanting to know and wanting to understand and feeling like, gaining a confidence through that. So definitely some background there with apologetics, as well as currently studying for a degree in counseling, a master's in counseling from Denver Seminary. So that's something where I've just found the relation between those things to be super interesting, and also a lot of times not very like explored, sort of like there's people in one world over here in apologetics, and like they have their topics and the things they're interested in and the way they see things. And then people over in the counseling world who maybe many of them are also Christians, but they're approaching different topics or similar topics with like a very different perspective. So really interested in like bringing those together and how they both inform what it means to be Christian and how we like live as Christians. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Before I let Sarah jump in here, what are you learning currently that you're excited about?
Oh, that's a good question. Something that relatively recently that I've been digging into a bit more is the idea of hope and how hope relates to suffering and what we do with that as Christians, and just how important the role of hope is to how we experience and relate to suffering, whether that's our own or other people's. So.
Well, for somebody listening, since you just brought that up, who might be struggling with having hope. I mean, as you're mentioning that, I was just telling my husband earlier today, I said, I feel so heavy because I know so many people who are struggling right now. Physically, most of them, but also mentally because of the physical stuff. So anything that could point to hope for those people maybe listening who are in that place, Jesse?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe this will come back up in questions later and we can go into it more, but I think one of the things that's really unique about bringing in some of the like insights of psychology into the world of Christianity when we think about hope, and the way that some people like Kurt Thompson talks about hope from a neurobiological perspective, and says that hope is in that sort of world, is talking about the embodied experiences that we have, experiences with other people that help us imagine the world in a more positive way and imagine the future in a way that's like, oh, maybe the future could be good, through the experiences we have with other people. And that's good. I think that's really cool to think of the way that the experiences we have can actually help us feel hope more deeply, like when we meet like love or kindness or understanding in someone else, another human. And that's like really cool to think like, oh, that's one of the ways that we're made. But I think beyond that, what Christianity is offering is hope actually like is pointing us towards a specific person and a specific thing in Jesus. So it's not like, oh, I just have this experience that physiologically or psychologically like is designed to give me more hope. And it's not just in that, it's actually pointing us towards something that's more in Jesus Christ. So that's what I think of with the question you're asking. But
Yeah. Well, and you also touched on something there about belonging, right? Having that sense of community. And I'm curious, since you mentioned it earlier when you were introducing yourself, with the marriage of apologetics and counseling, and I know we touched on this last time because of my master's in counseling and my work with apologetics, that sometimes it can feel like two very different places and spaces, like I need to ignore this one in order to focus on this. Have you felt like you found a sense of belonging in trying to marry those two, or is it still murky waters to navigate, I guess?
I think there's a certain level of like that murkiness, or at least like continuing to navigate those different things. Partly because it's like they do seem to be like pretty distinct like communities within like Christianity. Like I've given some different like talks to different groups of people. Like I've gone up to the seminary and talked some on this topic of like spiritual formation from a perspective of apologetics. And there's this sort of like blank stare from half the class where it's like, wait, what are we talking about? And then on the other side, in this sort of apologetics world where they're maybe unfamiliar or uncomfortable with that, the world of like counseling. So that there's that part of it where it's like, these are just sort of like somewhat separate communities. And I find myself in one or partly in one or the other. But I think like for myself, as I'm navigating it, I'm finding deeper places of understanding how they come together, or like how as Christians, like we don't have to reject one in order to be able to like live within the other. Like a place where I think this has maybe more tension than most is like specifically evangelism. Whereas like a counselor, you're not supposed to do that. In fact, cannot do that ethically as like a licensed counselor if you're practicing under certain like boards. And that's like really difficult for Christians a lot of times. If then they're like not allowed to share their faith or talk about it. So for me, like navigating those things of like, okay, what does it mean to, like, what do you do with that? And just finding ways of making more sense of like, how are we, even if we don't explicitly share the gospel with a client, is there a way that we're able to share Christ with them through who we are? Which I think, Sarah, that might get to some of what you said of your question of like struggling with how God meets us through other people.
Mm-hmm.
But
One more clarifying question for you, Jesse, and then I'm going to ask Sarah this. For someone listening who's not familiar with the term apologetics, I know we talk about it a lot on this podcast, but some people just find an episode and they've never watched one before. And apologetics was a term I didn't learn until my 30s. So would you mind sharing what that is? Yeah.
sure, I can try to.
I think you can.
Yeah. I would say that apologetics sort of classically is the idea of giving a reason and an argument for your faith or why you believe what you believe. So lots of times that's like making arguments from philosophy or history or logic or something else in order to try to prove or make more plausible the Christian faith. So yeah, that's what apologetics is. There's different styles, I guess you could say, where like the degree that I studied in specifically was cultural apologetics, and less interested in like how do we make a philosophical argument for God, and maybe how do we show that Christianity is not just true, but it's also something that's good and beautiful, and sort of trying to bring in more elements of what the Christian life and the history of Christianity has looked like, and making it not just something like this is true, you need to believe it, it's because it's true, but something that's like this is really compelling, and like hopefully people will want to believe it's true and want to pursue a relationship with Christ. But that's how I would describe it, I guess.
That's good. All right, Sarah, you got any questions for Jesse?
Of course. I would really love to just start with that question for you. Why do you believe in God? What do you lean towards apologetically from your life?
Yeah. It's a big question. And I think there's so many ways to think about that question of like, why do I believe what I believe? And I think for me, so like I've got this background where like there's lots of like making the arguments, like trying to like debate what seems the most true or what's logically true. And so there's definitely a lot of that is sort of like been a part of my journey of like what do I believe and why do I believe it. But I think, and you can ask follow-up questions if you want, if this isn't specific enough, but I think it's because I believe that Christianity offers the best way for us to live as Christians, the best type of life for us, like human flourishing and like joy and beauty and goodness and experiencing those things, and is probably also true. So I think there's different people have very different relationships with the idea of like certainty, and like, maybe needing like a really high degree of certainty to be like, I need to know that I know that I know that this is true 100%. There's no questions. And then other people have less of a need for certainty, and not like, oh, I don't care, like nothing matters, but like there's a higher tolerance for like ambiguity of like, maybe I don't know, maybe I can't know everything completely. And for me, that is like more the way that I approach life and faith. That I think through like searching for questions, searching for answers, like trying to understand things, recognizing that like I will never know everything, and there's like a lot of limitations on my own ability to know everything, and just as it is for anybody. So I think like I live with a degree of ambiguity there. Like if someone were to ask me like, are you 100% sure that like Jesus died for your sins and like rose from the grave? Like I know a lot of Christians would say, yes, I know that absolutely 100%. That's what faith means. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just like have a different sort of like relationship with certainty, where I'm like, well, no, I don't know that happened because I wasn't there. And it's a historical sort of event that seems like really likely and probable to me, but am I 100% sure? No, but that's something that I am okay with.
Sounds like the right kind of person for you to be talking to, Sarah.
Well, okay, so
I mean, we just talked to J. Warner Wallace a couple days ago, so she's got lots of.
So I would say I'm on the other end of that spectrum. Okay. Like you said, I do really want the high degree of certainty, and I'm trying to figure out biblically what we are supposed to have, like what we are supposed to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm learning that a lot of it is based on our personalities. And I think I have a more skeptical personality,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me really want more of the concrete answers and the evidence. And I feel less comfortable with the ambiguity, um, but also recognizing that I'm probably going to have to accept some degree of just not knowing. But I do. This is something I'm trying to um, explore more right now. Is figuring out what in the New Testament does it look like we are actually supposed to experience as Christians, and is that matching up with reality? Um, and so, yeah, with this kind of topic, I am curious about how we are supposed to, or like how God has told us that we will experience him, um, and if that is coming to pass or not. So I think I'm not sure exactly where this idea came from, and maybe this is just like bad teaching or subconscious thoughts that I've had, that God is supposed to be like this presence of love in our life, and we're supposed to be satisfied in him. Um, And my experience has been like the absence of God,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of struggling with his silence and feeling like
Mm-hmm.
he's not showing up in in the way I'm asking him to, um, and not like not wanting to kind of like test God, but also saying, if you care for me and if you are supposed to have a relationship with me, then like, where are you? What is your side of the relationship? Um, I feel like I'm doing what I can. Are you are you meeting me, or am I just making this up on my own? Um, yeah, do you have thoughts about like how we should expect God to to show up in our lives that way?
Yeah. Um, I also have, I think, a lot of the same questions that you're like expressing to a certain degree.
I think you're similar, the two of you. That's what I was thinking when he was
Yeah.
talking the first time. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah.
Continue. Sorry.
Um, yeah. And yeah, so I think I have a lot of the same types of questions. And I think to a certain degree, um, it's definitely true that it seems like, based on what we see in scriptures and in the New Testament, that we should have some sort of like experience of God and of God's love for us and of God shaping our lives, and the love of Christ like directing who we are. And that should be like an experience and not just an idea. Um, and so I think that's true. I don't think that's like bad teaching. I
Mm-hmm.
do think it's like very difficult, um, in terms of like actually experiencing that or knowing what that's supposed to feel like or look like. I am curious before I share more of the thoughts that I have, like, um, what I guess what you would like expect that to look like, or if you've seen that in people's lives where it seemed real. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you sort of would expect that it would be similar for everyone, or that it would look different person to person. Just like interested to know more of what that looks like in your own life or thought process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I would expect it to look somewhat different, based on different people and their needs and personalities and backgrounds. And so I could definitely allow for that variance, but I guess I I have the spectrum of relationships to where some people are like you said, like feel 100% God is totally real. I know for sure he's my best friend kind of thing, like always talking about him, always like relating everything back to him. Um, and then, and yeah, have the people who are more like me, like more like, where is God? I don't know, but I'm gonna continue and
Mm-hmm.
trust that he's gonna like be um he's gonna he is there even if I don't think he is. Um and in my life I would love to have something that feels more concrete to where I could say that definitely was God, like without a shadow of a doubt. Because I I very much want to say, um, like, you know, God gives you the good parking spot and you're like, oh, thank you, God. Like I want to be like that, but I don't feel like I can because you have to recognize all the things that don't turn out the way that you want them to
Right.
also. And so it's not like I don't want it to be that kind of relationship where it is just like you see God acting in your life in these certain ways that make you feel happy, but
Mm.
like that's not the relationship that I want. um I want more than the gifts, I guess. Like maybe not the audible voice, but something. Yeah, does that help?
I think so, because when you say like you would like to experience something that's more like concrete or like clearly God, are you thinking of like an experience versus rather than like a really great argument or like a really great story, but
Hmm.
like something that you experienced yourself?
Yeah, I think that that's what would be more satisfying and um helpful because know a lot of the arguments, like I've heard a lot of the stuff, and sure there might be more coming out. Hopefully there will be, but that I think there's always going to be the opportunity to doubt it
Mm-hmm.
and to look at the other options. And when there's an actual personal experience that you feel like this was something that happened, um, it would have to be like pretty clear because I could definitely explain it away.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't like when people do use their own personal experience like as reason for God to be real because that's their own experience and you can't like share that with another person in a empirical way. So yeah. But it would be nice for me.
Yeah. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. And I feel very similarly with this sort of like um this idea of like certain people will see God in almost anything, but sometimes it feels like it's kind of picking and choosing. We're like, oh, this really
Hmm.
nice thing happened, and that's what you picked up of like the parking spot. Like,
Hmm.
um, that's what you picked up on to say like that must have been God. But there's like so many other reasons that could have happened, and doesn't necessarily mean anything. That's the way that a particular person is interpreting that. Um, but I feel really similar in terms of the like skepticism of like, well, I don't actually know why that happened that way or what that says about God. Um, but yeah, I think there's like, I do think, and I don't know if you feel this way or not. I think that like skepticism can like coexist really well with like a healthy faith of like, I think for me personally, I think I could, I could do well with like a little bit more skepticism about my own like ability to like understand God or understand the world. and also really do with some more like personal experience that gives me something clear to like hold on to. Um, I don't think those have to be like one or the other. Um, and so, yeah, some of my thoughts just on the general sort of like idea that you're bringing up. I think a lot of this experience, because I think what you're describing isn't very uncommon. Like, there's definitely people who have totally different experiences, and they're like, absolutely, they have no doubts, they feel God in their life every day. But I think there's a lot of people who feel something similar and then have to make a choice of what they do with it. Are they going to wrestle with that? Are
Mm-hmm.
they going to try to like find God in a deeper way? Are they going to sort of just like accept that and be like, well, this must be what Christianity is, so I'm just going to sort of like go through this regardless of how it feels? Or like, well, this isn't what I thought it was supposed to be, so I'm going to walk away from it. I think the basic experience of like, where is God is pretty fairly common. And I think that one of the places that comes from is living in a Christianity that's really focused on our head and our intellectual sort of knowledge and um, sort of what you know and what you believe defines you as a Christian. And in some ways, that's so much easier because, like, I can learn things. I can say this is what I believe. This makes sense to me, and that's way easier than seeking like another person or God as a person, or like experiencing Him in a deep way and like opening ourselves up to um, someone outside of us. So I think that's a big part of the culprit in terms of the context that we're in. So like for you and me and a lot of other people, I think part of the reason it's hard for us to find that is because we live in a Christian context that so heavily relies on what we know and what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that I would say has been my experience through most of my life. And like, and now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, how do I move past that? What does it look like to find something deeper? Because it seems like, to a certain degree, the ways I've tried to do that as a Christian so far, they're not getting me closer to God. So I have more thoughts, but I'm saying a lot. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that so far?
Okay, so that was one of the things that's good you reminded me that listening to the last podcast you did, I was both annoyed and convicted when you were saying that same kind of thing of like we focus on the intellectual and not as much on the experiential. Um, because I definitely do focus on the intellectual and I like it. And and
Yeah, I
I
get
like,
that.
I don't want it to be about like feelings and our personal, yeah, experiences because I think that is very valuable individually, but I'm not sure how that helps, um, corporately. Like how are you evangelizing to another person, um, saying just your own personal experience? It's not, or and especially when your experience has been frustrating and has been
Mhm.
disappointing, um, because I think about that a lot of like as a Christian, yes, I do want to talk with other people about God, but mostly those conversations end up being like, yeah, what do you think about God? Like all these opinions one way or the other, but it's not compelling because I don't have any story to tell of like, yeah, God's really close to me and I am so benefited by this relationship. Like
Yeah,
most of the time I'm not sure if there even is a relationship and it just feels like I'm doing things to say that I'm doing them, but is anything happening? I don't know. And it's like that's not what I want to be advertising to another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I've definitely, when it comes to evangelism in particular, I've felt that way many times. Um, and I think it has to be both and like both. There is an intellectual component. There is a degree to which like we need to understand and believe and like know who God is. But I think there has to also be a experiential component because of what you're describing. Because if it's purely intellectual, like what are we offering to other people other than an idea? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, not a relationship with a person, because it's like I don't know, like I'm not sure about mine, so I'm not sure what I'm offering you. Um, and to me, the thing that this comes back to, and this may be sound controversial to certain certain sections of the church, like evangelism, very important, a very like crucial part of the church and church life and what Christ has called us to. At the same time, with what you're describing, I think that what God calls us to primarily is to release what we have received from Him. So, like, God is not offering, like, God is not asking us, I think, to do anything that He hasn't given us to, like, then offer to other people,
Mm.
which to me sometimes might mean, like, I need to know for myself what it means and what it feels like to be in a relationship with Jesus before I can like offer that to other people. Um, and the reason I think that could sound controversial is it sounds like, oh, you just want to like everybody to sort of like focus on themselves and self-improvement instead of like advancing the kingdom and sharing the gospel. And it could be taken that way. But I think it's like, what I'm trying to say is like, when we've received something that's like so beautiful and good and like filling for us, then we actually have something to give.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like, yeah, like maybe sometimes there's like, that's not what you need to do in your life right now. You don't need to go evangelize people if you're like needing to like work through your own experience with Christ. Um, so um, that's my thoughts,
I
Janelle.
think, well, I just want to affirm what you just said, Jesse, because it's biblical. I think of John 17:3, where Jesus said, and this is eternal life, that they would know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. That word know there, you probably are more familiar with that word than I am, but I've been like fixated on it for a while. It's that Greek word gnoskos, which means like a deep, intimate knowing, relational knowing of like almost, the intimacy between a husband and wife. And a lot of times I think about that, even sometimes when I'm on these trips where we're doing apologetics, and it's like, man, what all does it come back to? It's, do I actually know him? And what does that look like to just hunger and thirst for a deeper relationship with him? And I do think that the way that God interacts with us is different depending on maybe our personalities and our makeup and all these different things. But those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will find it. Those who hunger and seek Him will find it. And I think um, it's just interesting to me, like what you were talking about, Sarah. I totally understand that. I've talked to you before about being skeptical too. But at the end of the day, Scripture also says that every good and perfect gift comes from Him. And that piece of like, okay, I'm just going to receive this as something good from him, even if it is, the parking spot that, could have just been happening. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. And then when the things that happen that aren't great, okay, I'm trusting you with it. And so much of, and not that this is about me, but like I'm just thinking about my own journey, was this place of like, okay, you give and you take away. Blessed be your name either way. I just want to know you. And it is life giving. And I think that that's not a self help thing. That's like we have to receive it before we can pour it out. I was listening to a pastor one time, Charles Price, and he was talking about, going to a church that just said, love God, love people. And I that's what I wanted to be on my tombstone one day. And he was like, I would never go to a church that just had that. And it was so controversial, but he's just like, and I might be misquoting Charles Price. Sorry, if you ever listen to this, because I'd love to have him on one day because I just think he's fantastic. But, and I don't know all of his stuff, but what I've heard is great. Just got to give that caveat these days. Anyway, I'm right. But like, he said, I would never go because you have to remember that it's him who loves first. We love because he first loved us. And we have to receive that first before we can pour it out. And so it shouldn't be controversial, what you just said, Jesse, because it's, as far as I can see, it's all over the Bible.
I would agree. I do think though still that it could feel very like freeing of like, okay, I don't have to go out and do these things that I feel like I have no energy or no ability to do. It could feel very freeing, or I could also see it feeling really like frustrating of like, well, but I don't feel those things. What am I supposed to do with that? So I think it may be a hard thing to wrestle with sometimes for people who are in that place. And I've found that to be true sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
So what do you do when you are the frustrated person of like, God, I want to be a witness for you, and yet I don't have anything?
Yeah. I think like if we back it up again to, I think I think I could be wrong, but I think you have to start in a place of like looking at yourself and looking at focusing on your relationship with God and how you can bring that into something that is more full and deep and meaningful for you. There's a John Calvin quote that's very famous in which he says something like, so just paraphrase whatever, like we can only know ourselves by knowing God, and we can only know God when we know ourselves. So there's this like feedback loop where like if we try to understand God without understanding who we are and how we relate to him, we're going to do that very insufficiently or incompletely. And also if we try to understand ourselves without understanding God or knowing who he is, we'll also fail to do that. So like we have to do both together. And I think that's important to note because again, a lot of times there's this idea or this sort of like undercurrent of tension or pressure of like, we shouldn't be focused on ourselves at all. What we should focus on is God and God's work and what he's doing through us. But I would say like, we have to a certain degree to understand who God is and how we fit into his story. And like, even just the fact that like part of who God is in his relationship with us. Like we understand who he is because of how he relates to us and his love for us. And so we have to look at ourselves in that. And I think, so what do you do to get to the place where then you can pour out from what you've received in the way that you want to? So speaking from sort of like my own experience, I think when I think about it, that a lot of it has to do with attachment styles and individual ways that we relate to one another. So
I was
I'm
just
sure
going to
that's
ask about
something
that. Yeah.
you had questions or thoughts about from the last time that I was on and you listened to this. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you're familiar with it other than what I said last time, or
So
I
I
have,
told
yeah, go ahead.
Janelle before that I literally yesterday was researching attachment styles. Like it came up, I don't even know what from. And then listened to the podcast today and I was like, oh my gosh, you're talking about attachment styles. So yeah, I don't know very much at all. Um, just have briefly been looking into it and curious to see like how, and not wanting to make things into boxes or labels, but like how,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I can relate to God better knowing my attachment style.
Yeah. And I think that is really important to not box things in using the attachment styles idea. Um, I think it's super helpful. I think it becomes way less helpful when you start trying to like label yourself or other people and be like, well, then this definitely means this. Or
Mm-hmm.
if somebody does this, this means they're like this. Because people with similar or the same attachment styles, that might look super different for them and how that plays out in their life or their relationships with other people or with God. Um, but so basically, the premise of the way that I'm thinking about attachment styles here is that the way that we relate to other people in our lives says something about how we relate to God. And they're probably like
Mm-hmm.
pretty similar. Um, so without getting like all the way into all of it, um, so there's like a secure attachment, which is like the ideal. Not to say that a person with a secure attachment is perfect or has perfect attachment, but they have this sort of like confident ability. It has to do with self-image. They generally have a really positive self-image, have strong positive relationships with other people, have the ability to sort of like imagine the future and their relationships in a positive way, and to be really resilient. Um, they they know when to ask for help and when they can do things on their own, as a general rule, and they can sort of go through life with a confidence. Um, and so maybe for a lot of people who have secure attachments with other human people, um, it's easier for them to experience that sort of relationship with God, where they feel confident in themselves in that relationship. They feel understood, um, and they're less emotionally impaired than maybe other people might be. So the there's like three different types of insecure attachments. But the one that I'll mention and talk a little bit, because this is what I experience more and have like, as I've thought about it, like think that it does like impact my like relationship with Christ a lot, um, is a detached or avoidant attachment style, which the idea is attachment style in general. The idea is that your first couple years of life sort of set the template or the map for how you relate to other people, what you expect for other people, sort of how you think the world works in relationships. So for a avoidant attachment style, it's sort of like as a kid, you learned that you couldn't really rely on other people to meet your needs. You just had to do it on your own. So you're more likely to emotionally detach. You're less likely to be like really open with people. Um, just in general, more likely to internalize and sort of think of it in terms of like, um, no one's gonna no one's gonna be there for me, so I'm gonna have to like figure it out myself. And that doesn't have to look like super dramatic. Like that doesn't have to be like you were abandoned as a child and no one ever cared for you at all. It could run on a spectrum from secure to insecure, but maybe if you're someone who um, sort of attaches in a more dismissive or avoidant way, one of the things that makes really hard is to be emotionally like vulnerable with other people or even like with yourself. I think in a lot of ways, you sort of detach yourself from your own emotions so you don't have to feel those if they're bad. Um, and the question I've had to ask myself is like, okay, this like I think it works for a lot of people. Like being a dismissive, like avoidant, attached person, it's very functional. Like it's a way of going through the world that like gets you where you're trying to go, and helps you avoid the things that seem like really bad, like negative emotions, having other people's actions impact you negatively, make you feel really bad, um, avoids you from doing things that make yourself feel bad. And it's really great because you get to avoid feeling everything. So what I have to ask myself when I think of like a dismissive attachment style is like in being able to avoid all these bad feelings, what else am I missing out on in the range of like emotional and experiential reality that I'm sort of like detached from, because that's how I relate to other people. And then thinking about that in relation to God and thinking, okay, seems like there's like a pretty good chance that my experience of God is in some ways limited because of the way that I relate with people in general. It's just very emotionally detached often. It's hard to like sort of get through to me sometimes, and it's hard for me to feel like I can be vulnerable. So I think, to answer your question, what it seems like the answer is, and this is something I'm still working on, it seems like the answer is you have to learn to like, this is, I don't know if this is like a very good way to describe this, but like you have to learn to be a vulnerable person. You have to learn to open yourself up to other people and open yourself up to negative emotions or experiences or pain in order to truly connect with other people and be open to the possibility of like truer joy and connection. And I think that would be true with like relationships with people and with God. It seems like that's what you'd have to do. How to do that exactly? What do you think of that idea?
uh, I don't disagree. It's just the easier said than done thing. Um, yeah, relationships are risky, and I think that I am avoidant, and I definitely find it easier to just not engage in relationships when they feel scary. So yeah, I'm gonna learn about that more. What, where do I go to learn about attachment style and like how to solve myself?
That's very eloquent. How to solve myself? Well, I think you might take this as bad news, but it will probably take your whole life to solve yourself. I
Oh,
think that's
great.
just like part of being human. Um, because I think it's just genuinely like very difficult in some ways to be like, okay, I can recognize, and this is like, I think you and I probably both feel this tension of like, we're intellectualizing like an experiential problem. And we're like, how can I like logic my way through to being a more vulnerable person? And like, I do that and that doesn't work. I can tell you that.
Great.
Don't waste your time on that.
I mean, I don't know. In some ways it's helpful. It is helpful. I do think, to understand more yourself, but it doesn't get you all the way there. So I think learning about attachment styles, there's a lot of good places. One of the books that two of the books I would recommend that I think do a good job of explaining it are Anatomy of the Soul by Kurt Thompson and The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is mostly a book about trauma, but one of his early chapters, he talks about attachment. Both of those are very good explanations of what that is. Kurt Thompson especially really digs into like, how does that relate to our faith and how do we grow in that when it's really difficult? So that is a really hard question. Like, how do I be a more vulnerable person? Um, yeah. Janelle, any thoughts?
I mean, Sarah, you're on a podcast where you're like exposing all of your questions. I feel like you're
Oh,
pushing into some of that already, but
no, this feels great and not vulnerable at all.
really?
I just keep forgetting that people are actually going to listen to this, so it feels like so easy.
I don't know. I feel like uh, I, I think leaning into the discomfort, we live in a world, especially in the United States where we live, where it's so easy to just stay comfortable. And so when we push into those places that feel like a little like, ooh, that feels not great. I remember one time I was with some people and I was like, I think God wants me to do this. And I'm sure my attachment style is something different that we didn't talk about. But like, I remember doing that and they were like, God would never ask you to do something that made you uncomfortable. I was like, pretty sure I've read parts of the Bible where he was always doing that, like leaning into the discomfort. And it's just easy to like stay in our spaces and do things the way we've always done. And I don't know. I know that maybe this doesn't feel, because this feels like a safe place, like a real vulnerable place. But I know, like, you even reaching out to me back in April and saying, hey, I don't know how many letters you get like this, but here's who I am. I feel like that's saying for me, when I think of you, Sarah, I think of someone who's really hungry for a deeper relationship. But I love what Jesse just shared, which is like, it is relational stuff that's going on. It is more of the emotional stuff. And yeah, maybe God isn't showing up the way you want him to. He never does. He never fits in that box that we want him to fit into, but that's kind of the wonder of him. What did I say? You want to push back? Say something.
Is that the wonder? That's where I don't like that, because you can't like prove anything through it. If God won't show up in the way that you want him to, if he's always doing something different, then how do you know it's God?
Jesse, go ahead.
Hey, that was something you said. I didn't know that I was going to answer that question. I think that's a good point. That I think, not to say that you are doing this, Janelle, but I think that's something that we do a lot as Christians. Is like, if we don't understand something, we could just sort of explain it as like, this is the mystery of God. And there's a lot of mystery to God. And I think that's like a reality that our own like finiteness and our own ability to understand things is like a true limitation on what we're able to know. But I don't know. I think I would just like, I would say that we should be able to hold an expectancy that God will do something that we can recognize him in, even if we don't see it right now. And that is sort of like where I'm at, in the sense of like, I don't exactly like, I know all these things. I've learned all these things. I've said I believe all these things. I know the arguments, counter arguments, whatever. I haven't experienced these things in the way that I think maybe I should be, but I want to continue to pursue like the opportunities that might lead me there. So I think there's a both and of like, I'm not recognizing God, and I'm not saying that is God working or that it's him not showing up, but I want to stay open, recognizing like, this is my real experience right now, is like, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand why, if this is how God's working, he would be working this way. And just like acknowledging like, that's what I'm experiencing. And I'm also still open and like expectant to see him in some way that I can recognize.
I'm going to send you, by the way, Sarah, as we're talking, I was thinking, I just listened to an amazing sermon by Tim Keller where he talks about Elijah and going up to the mountain and waiting for and God says, I'm going to come by, and he's not in the fire. He's not in the earthquake. He's not in the wind. He's in the whisper. And Tim Keller is like pointing out but he showed up in those other ways before, right? So he shows up how he shows up. And I know this is a deeper conversation that we could probably talk about for a long time. Like, how do we know it's God? And like, how do we know we're not just making it up and all those different things? But I think for the purposes of this conversation, like leaning into that place of like, God, how do I become more vulnerable in relationship with others, but also in relationship with you? What does that look like? And sometimes I think we want God to show up a certain way, like show up a certain way, dang it. And I know, I love you, Sarah, and we've only known each other 6 months, but I know I've heard that from you. Like, why didn't he just show up this way? And the thing is, like, he's going to show up the way he wants to show up. And he's God and we're not. And I know that might sound like a Christian cliche, but it's absolutely true. And when we get to that point where it's like, okay, like, uh, would you help me hear the whisper? If that's what you're going to do, or would you help me see the fire? Whatever it is, I want to be here for it. I don't want to miss it. And so anyway, Jesse, it looks like you want to say something, and then we've got our final question, and we'll wrap up here.
Okay. I guess one other thought that I am having right now, Sarah, in relation to kind of what you shared, I think for myself, one of the things that I've like come to accept and haven't come to like yet is that like if I want to experience God more or know him more deeply, it's not something that I can do on my own. Like it has to be in relationship with other people. Like this is one, like I think this, and this is like a totally tangential topic that we could get very deep into, but I think God has designed us relationally such the way that we grow and learn is through relationship with other people made in his image, which I have not learned to like yet because I would prefer if I could do it by myself. Like, it's just so much easier. Like, don't have to be vulnerable. But like through this, like some of the like things that I've just like really gotten interested in studying in the past 5 years and learning about, and have become convinced about like what it means to be made in God's image as like a relational being, is that that's how it happens. And I'm very convinced of that, but haven't figured out how to do that fully. I definitely have had experiences where I know that there's truth in that in my own life from certain relationships or certain communities that were very full. I don't know how to describe that, but yeah, I don't know if that like feels just like heavy and annoying or encouraging to be able to say like, we do need other people in order to pursue and seek God in a deeper way.
Yes, it both and it yes does feel frustrating knowing that I was literally just saying this to a friend of mine that like when I am in those really life-giving positive communities having great conversations, it makes me think, oh, God is real. Like, of course, this all makes sense. And, but I can't trust that because it's just their influence on me. And if I am removed from that situation, I don't have that same confidence in God. And so yeah, it gets back to like not wanting to, um, to have my beliefs in God be founded in experience. But I think that it doesn't make sense to me that God would have such a strong portion of our faith be in relationship with other people because, like we already established, it is very risky and things do not go well all of the time. And then, like, that can cause our faith to crumble as well. And so if it's based on other people, it's not the foundation that I think it should be. Or like I don't feel good about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a whole nother episode, I think, in terms of like how does that all work? Because I don't think our relationship or our faith should be based in other people, but I do think that our relationship with other people is so foundational to who we are as individuals and how we relate to God, that we can't take it out of that. So, yeah, there's a lot more that could be said about that. But I'll just say that I am in so many ways on the same journey you're on, and like looking for ways to experience God more. And I guess I would hope that that's something that you continue to press into and seek.
Yeah, thank you.
Man, I just want to say shout out to Jonathan and Janice Schmidt, who the very first time I remember experiencing, these high moments like what you were talking about, Sarah, where you're surrounded by people who are living it, who they're like praising God. And I remember my youth pastor, Jonathan, and his wife, Janice, they just loved Jesus so much. And the way that they served and were poured out, I remember looking at them thinking, I want what they have. I want what they have. And throughout my life, now it's been a long time, I still think about them. I still think about them at times and how foundational they were at that pivotal time in my life in my youth, where I was just like, man, give me more of that. Jesus, I want to know you that way. Anyway, final question here, Jesse. Thank you so much for sharing. We could have a longer conversation here. We may have to have you back. But finding something real is about finding something real with Jesus, finding restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those things, restoration, eternity, authenticity, or love, stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
I think I'd have to say authenticity. And that's probably come through a little bit in the conversation, just because in my own life, like I'm sharing with Sarah, like I think my ability to be authentic with God and with other people, I think it's really hard a lot of times to like get to the level of depth and vulnerability that I think leads to like growth and connection, and like the ability to experience love and joy with other people or with God. And that's like something that I've just really been thinking about and trying to figure out how to pursue, is like, how do I be that authentic when everything inside me is like, don't do that. That's very dangerous and you should avoid it. But just recognizing, like, I think this is what, like, part of it, what it means to be called to follow Christ and know him is to be really authentic. And that's very scary. So that's what I think of.
Well, Jesse Childress, thank you so much for being back here. And Sarah, thank you for coming and co-hosting. You ask great questions, and I just love it so much. Any final thoughts for Jesse before we say goodbye to him?
Just thank you. I really appreciate your honesty and just being sharing that you are with me, because even just that feels encouraging. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation with both
Yeah,
of
it's
you guys.
fun.
Great. Until next time.